Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in day to about Kagurabachi, chapter number 94. This chapter is titled, The Second Arrow. And quickly before we hop into this chapter today, I'm sorry if I sound a little bit off. I am currently battling some sort of sickness that I do not know what it is. Thankfully, it's none of like the big sicknesses that at least like makes me have a very high fever, or hey, thankfully it's not COVID-19. I had to test for that this morning out of like worry of, oh no, what do I have, right? So my nose is just like a little congested and like I've got a little bit of a cough. So if I sound a little bit off during this Kagurabachi video, that's why. But getting into more of the on-topic stuff, which I'll let you guess what that is, it's a series called Kagurabachi. This is a chapter. Whenever I sat down and first read this chapter, I was so on edge the entire time. Because, of course, last chapter I had made the prediction off of, like, events that occurred. I'll talk about those here in a second. But, like, hey, Hakure's here. The Shinuchi's right in front of him. Hakure's going to walk up, try to soar the Shinuchi. And you know what? He's going to get taken over. And I was like, oh no, that's going to be bad for Hakure, but really good for this story's narrative. And, hey, I don't get Kagurabachi theories, right? That's not my whole shtick right here, you know? Because what ends up happening is something completely different. Did I mention we get the Traitor Reveal in this chapter? Yeah, that happens. And yeah, I always was like, yeah, you know who's a traitor? Kudo is. And then I sat down here, read this chapter, and got a little disappointed by the Traitor Reveal. And I'll sort of talk about it later, probably whenever I read it, but this was a Traitor Reveal I wasn't hoping was going to happen. But it's sort of what we ended up getting at the end of the day, and I will be discussing that whenever we get to it, you know what I'm saying? But of course, we're going to talk about this chapter of Kagurabachi. Let me briefly talk about what happened last time in Kagurabachi. And mainly, it was like, hey, we see the battle between, like, hey, Aruha and Natsuki versus Hokuto and Yura is still going on, as all of them are, like, clashing their blades, doing all of their various things, right? We also got names for a few of the Hishaku members, mainly Uran and Bingo, of course, the ice lady who was there to murder Kunishige. She's got ice powers. It's still really, really cool. And of course, Bingo, Mako, Demon Bite guy. But either way, going on through all of that various stuff, we eventually saw a few other things like, hey, all of the Hishaku members are really surrounded by certain Kabanabi members at this point. It looks like, hey, bigger battles are getting ready to happen. And eventually we cut over to Hakure and Kiri, who are running throughout all of the hallways of the Kabanabi headquarters. I almost forgot the name of this arc for some reason. And of course, they ran into Azami and Ichiki, as the two of them were also heading down to the Shinuchi as well. So pretty much these group of 4 people all get ready and head down to Shinuchi. And yeah, that's pretty much where we start this chapter of Kagurabachi. Again, chapter number 94, titled The Second Arrow. Now, we really start this chapter in a little bit of a flashback. Of course, whenever all of these characters, what is it, Izami, Ichiki, Hakure, and Kiri, there's a lot of names that ends with E there. No, wait. Hakure, Kiri, Ichiki, and Izami. Yeah, they all end with I. What's going on here? I was like, wait, am I just tripping? No, they actually just all end with I. That's a little bit funny, right? But this is when they were all in the elevator getting ready to head down to the lowest level of the Kabanabi HQ, wherever, of course, the Shinuchi is currently being held. And Ichiki starts off the chapter by really going on a little bit of a longer, like, monologue saying, like, hey, so Hakure, from what you've told us, in order to transport something into the warehouse, you have to register it by channeling spirit energy into the thing. The seal on the Shinuchi was already broken when the Shinuchi was put up to auction at the Rakuzaichi, which means that Kiora Sazanami poured spirit energy into the Shinuchi very early on, when the seal had just been broken. In other words, channeling spirit energy into it alone is not quite enough. To activate the Shinuchi's powers, you need a strong desire to actually use the sword. And that means that by channeling spirit energy into it beforehand, it should be possible to activate its powers while the Shinuchi is being kept here at the Kabanabi HQ. So we pretty much get the whole idea here. I know it's a little bit of a complicated thing. Whenever I first read this chapter, I'm like, what is Ichiki really talking about here, right? But the whole idea he's getting across is that once you store spirit energy in the blade, it sort of persists there. So, like, you can go outside and you can use it like Hyora did at the Rakuzaichi. And granted, if Hyora was still alive, his spirit energy would still be in that blade, and then he could activate it remotely here from wherever he was into the Kabanabi HQ. And it really seems like that is what Hyora could have done, right? And that's pretty much the whole idea that Ichiki is trying to get across here in the moment, right? And Haku's like, hey, but like, how is that actually done? And Ichiki just is like, yep, you're right. His powers can only be used for a limited time. There's a price. The Swordmaster quickly worms his way into you, hijacking your pretty much brain and body from within. The activator then loses their sense of self, and it's really all over for them. It's almost like what happened to Kyoara Sazanami at the Rakuzaichi. Of course, he poured his spirit energy and he used like his powers of desire to be like, hey, I'm going to use the Shinuchi to save the Rakuzaichi. And he sort of then went and did that, and we sort of saw what happened. The Swordmaster went through, started like taking over his body, using him as like the vessel for him to wield this sword. And yeah, bad things happened to Hyora at the end of the day, right? As Ichiji just continues to be like, hey, as a strategy, it's really a double-edged sword with a razor-sharp edge, which I've never heard. Like, I've of course heard like phrase a double-edged sword, like, hey, it is something, but on both sides there are potentially bad things that could happen. Except here there are bad things that are even worse. That's honestly a really fun like little bit of a metaphor here, and that's pretty cool, Ichiki, right? But for either way, he just says like, hey, and for that reason, we concluded that it was unlikely that someone would attempt to approach the Shinuchi. But just in case, the three of us investigated the blade. It's been confirmed that it hadn't been charged with anybody's spirit energy. And after that, we resealed the Shinuchi. Like last time, it was me, Kasen, and Yotsuru who did it. Of course, this whole idea of who went back and sealed up the blade here after all these other events had gone through and happened. And it's very interesting. Hey, we get two names of Kabanabi leaders here in the moment. We get Kasen, of course, who is the old guy who is the, like, biggest leader of the Kabanabi, and then Yatsuru, who is, like, the other female, like, right-hand man to Kasen, as we sort of, again, it's weird finally learning these characters' names, right? But either way, Viz, they had a mistranslation here in the moment, as we just see that, Ichiki continues being like, hey, and apart from Hikyuki, it's supposed to say Hiyuki, except they put a K in there, making it Kyuki. Okay, Viz, fix that real quick. But why is it always, like, her name that gets so messed up? Like, a little while ago, we had the whole idea of, like, the Hibiki room, and now we have the whole idea of, like, hey, look at this, it's Hikyuki and not Hiyuki. Okay, whatever, right? But pretty much Ichiki just explains like, hey, apart from Hiyuki and Tefuku, ever since the Rakuzaichi, only the three of us have come in contact with that blade. And of course, we know like Hiyuki and Tefuku have no reason to go through and like pour their spirit energy into the blade to cause like mass devastation. And granted, we don't really know much about either Hiyuki or Tefuku's characters, but from what we know, they're good people. They're not looking to destroy the world here, and they're probably not working with Yura, you know what I'm saying? But either way, we then just see Izami being like, hey, Hakuri, being that you're confused, those are the three sorcerers who you saw wearing the white robes, pretty much, right? He says like, hey, the guy in the middle was the Kabanabi leader, his name is Kasen, and on both sides were his assistants, of course, Ichiki, who's right here, and Yatsuru, the female one, right? They're also the most powerful sorcerers in all of the Kabanabi. And Haku's like, but wait a second, but Mr. Kudo said that, Izami, that you're like on another level as well. And I really like how we just see that Ichiki looks over and gives like Izami some side-eye here in the moment. It's a little bit of a funny thing. As Izami just says like, hey, he probably meant that I'm on another level as a fighter, but physically I'm a bit younger than all of the others, right? But as sorcerers, these three are giants compared to me. Apart from the innate sorcery I was born with, things like barriers and sealing spells are really just the realm of scholars. And Hakuri also says like, oh, but that's also what Mr. Kudo said. He said like the Masumi had memorized all of the books on the library level too, pretty much, right? And as Hakuri says this, Izami then just points to him and says like, hey, but just so you know, those three in the white robes actually have about twice as much in their heads. And Haku's like, what do you mean like twice? That's like, no way, right? And we also see here in the moment that Hakuri, or not Hakuri, Ichiki's like, that's an over-exaggeration pretty much, right? But now bringing us back into, like, the regular, like, narrative here. Ichiki's like, hey, the Hishaku's recklessness only makes sense if they have a powerful ace up their sleeve. And he's like, hey, my worry is that one of the three of us could be colluding with the Hishaku. Of course, a traitor in the midst. One of the white robes could have altered the Shinuchi's steel, weakening it in the midst of chaos, for example. Or we could have given it to one of their disposable pawns within the Kabanabi. Or it's also just possible that the Hishaku are simply just reckless. I've known both of them for many years, of course talking about Kasen and Yatsuru, and he's like, hey, I just need to prove to myself that my suspicions are unfounded. As eventually we see the elevator dings, as it's time for everybody to walk out and see the Shinuchi here in the moment. And as everybody does, of course, the group of Ichiki, Aizami, Hiyuki, no, not what Hiyuki, I know it's the eyes, but it's Hakari, that's what this kid's name is, and Kiri, all walk out, and we see that Kasen is standing here looking down at the Shinuchi. And we, of course, see that, like, hey, Hakari has the Iso mask on, or the storehouse mask on his face, getting ready to, like, go through and actively use his ability. And here in the moment, we just see that Ichiki's like, oh, hey, Kasen. And, of course, Kasen's like, oh, Ichiki. As we just look down to see the seal on the Shinuchi is still strong. As Ichiki even is like, wow, it's fine, that's a good thing. The seal is intact. Maybe I was just overthinking all of it. As we see here in the moment, Kasen turns around and says like, oh, Hakari Sazanami, you made it. And Ichiki's like, hey, as planned, he will now transport the Shinuchi into the warehouse where nobody can get their hands on it, right? And he just thinks like, hey, the Shaku have no chance of taking down Kabunabi headquarters. As you just see that Kasen just says, no. As Ichiki just has this deadpan stare, looking here at the moment at Kasen, as we just get another look at the seal still intact on the Shinuchi. We now cut over to the battle of, hey, Natsuki, Iruha, Hokuto, and Yura here in the moment, as of course, all of them are just clashing their swords together in like this big mass and like this water feature of one of the Kabanabi libraries pretty much, right? We see that Hokuto and Natsuki are sort of all broken off and they're doing their own fighting once again. We see that Natsuki goes through, uses Lightning Menace, and just like blasts Hokuto through a few walls. And he's like, oh, so this duel is over then, right? As we also just go over and get a look where, hey, Iruha and Yura are fighting. Those are the other two in this battle. And they're both sort of just going through and doing their thing. We see that, like, yes, being that he was reminded of it, Iruha is now fully using his Koin sorcery here in the moment. As Yura is just like, man, like, they're both going full throttle with their sorcery. They definitely want to kill us as fast as possible, pretty much, right? He's like, hey, Iruha, he is the trump card that Samura left behind. It seems like neither of them are giving up the ghost that easily, right? And also, Yura's just thinking like, hey, we also can't discount the outcome in Kyoto as well. As all of a sudden, we just see that Yura just thinks like, oh, Hokuto, the fun and games are now over. As Yura out loud says like, all right then, so be it. As we see that in the moment, Natsuki has come over to join Iruha in the fight against Yura, as like, hey, he just blasted Hokuto into a wall, and hey, as this happens, we all of a sudden see that Yura just disappears. Like, he just almost teleports away just like that. But then, oh my gosh, he's grabbed both Natsuki and Iruha by the neck, making almost both of them drop their blades here in the moment, as we just see like, hey, his blade is completely gone from his hands as well, as both Iruha and Natsuki are like, wait a second, like, what is his movement going on here, pretty much, right? They're like, wait a second, no, his strength also suddenly skyrocketed. As all of a sudden, we cut back over to where the Shinuchi is, as we see that even though the blade is sealed, there's a little bit of spirit energy coming off of the blade. And all of a sudden, Ichiki's like, wait, but no, how can this be? Like, the seal's intact down there. It's like, no, wait, that spirit energy, it's pouring out from within the seal. Like, no, impossible. In other words, it was compromised before we sealed it. Like, how could I have ever overlooked that? He's like, no, wait. If someone knew at the time it had been charged with spirit energy, someone who was capable of covering it up. As of course, Ichiki, here in the moment, looks up to Kasen once more. As Ichiki's like, no, I don't believe it. As he thinks like, no, but that tactic could. As we now cut back over to Yura. As in the moment, he is holding both Natsuki and Aruha by their throats. As Yura just thinks, I charged the Shinichi with my spirit energy right before we submitted it to the Rakuzaichi auction. The point of the Rakuzaichi was to find out who had command of the Shinichi, and whether or not we could seize temporary control. It would be useless to wield if we would instantly be hijacked. And what we learned was the wielder needs astronomical mental fortitude on par with Kiora Sazanami to battle with it for even just a mere moment. It's almost paramount to suicide, but hey, we know this. However, Kiora Sazanami also proved that it is worth attempting with a level of unparalleled determination. As we see here in the moment, spirit energy is coming off of the Shinichi. Of course, we now know it's your spirit energy. And as we go through, hey, the Sword Saint down into Kabanabe HQ is standing up, and he mutters a third word. Malediction. As we see now here in the moment, from Yura's hands, holding both Natsuki and Aruha by the neck, we see vines and brambles and the greenery of plant life start to come out of his skin. As Yura just says, hey, I told you, this was a battle to the death. As in the moment, we see the form of the centipede wrapped around Yura's body, as his eyes are black like we've seen them a few times before, the same eyes as the Sword Master. As we just see Yura say, with this power, we will overthrow you. As the final panel of the chapter, it's a small little panel by all means. We just get a good look at the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel, and crow feathers emanating in the air around it, leaving the area. And that's where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi. And yeah, that's where we end off this chapter of Kagurabachi. Fun fact, this part of the video I'm recording right now is being recorded like 20 minutes after I recorded the first section of this video, mainly for the fact that I mentioned that I don't feel the best. Well, I felt like taking a break, right? But that was honestly probably a good break to take, because during that time I talked with all of my friends over at the Kabanabe headquarters, the Kagurabachi podcast that I'm a part of. Yeah, it's a podcast on like YouTube and other podcasting platforms. If you want to hear like us talk about Kagurabachi for 2 hours straight, that's a great place to go and do it pretty much, right? But during that conversation, I learned a few things about this chapter. Mainly one of the big ones is another mistranslation that Viz actually made during this chapter, and that is whenever the Sword Saint stands up, he doesn't say malediction, he actually just says Magatsumi. So it's two words that start with M. Oops, yeah, it's sort of whatever. I get the same point of like, oh man, he's using the evil power here in the moment. Like, oh my gosh, it's a different version of the evil power? Like, it sort of is what it is there, right? But either way, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Hey, Kasen seems to be the traitor here in the moment. And this was really the one outcome I didn't want for the Traitor Reveal going into this arc, unless we got Kasen's character build up before. Because as it stands here, we see Kasen in like 8 panels in this chapter. I think that's 8 more panels than we've ever seen him really in before, right? Of course, we saw him whenever Cheer's like, hey, I want to join the Kabanabe. And yeah, it sort of is what it is there. Like, okay, we're getting introduced to this guy. And, of course, I was always in the camp of, hey, I want Kudo to be the traitor. I think it would be really fun because, like, hey, we see his character get built up by interacting with Hakuri. He dies, but he actually comes back because, hey, he fake killed himself the entire time because he was a traitor all along, having all of these mischievous plans. And sitting down here and being like, oh yeah, Kasen's a traitor. I totally get why, right? We don't know much about his character. He's a leader of the Kabanabi. Of course, he would have the strength to hide all of this from Ichiki here in the moment. But my one problem is, we don't know Kasen. I don't know a single character trait about him besides, oh, he stands here stoically and says, no, you cannot go through and use Hakuri Sazanami's powers to go through and transport the Shinuchi. Like, that's the only thing I know about this guy, which is why I feel like this traitor reveal is not really what I wanted. But on the same hand, is this really the traitor? Because, like, hey, on one foot, you can be like, hey, this guy working with the Shaku, but also, during that panel in, like, chapter number 73 of Kagurabachi, we saw the 4 characters that knew Kunishige Rokuhira's location. Of course, those characters were Ichiki, Kudo, Izami, and the earlobe Kabanabi guy we don't have a name for. At this point, it seems like Kudo is dead, and he wasn't working with Hishaku, so why would he have gone through and leaked all of that information, right? Izami, the best friend of Kurashige, they were like brothers almost, right? So why would he want to rat out his best friend to the evil guys, pretty much, and have him murdered? Not to mention, hey, Ichiki, in this moment, at least seems very cleared of all the suspicion that a lot of people have had for him in the past, leaving only Earlobe Guy who knew where Kunishige's location was. Which also makes me beg the question, how did Kasen possibly know Kunishige's location to give it to the Kabanabi, or to give it to the Shaku? Or is Kasen only working with the Shaku on this matter of the Shinuchi, right? And on one hand, as I just mentioned, those 4 characters there, I don't think it's Izami, right? He is, like, the best friend. Why would he want his friend to be killed, right? Ichiki, very much clear to suspicion. Kudo, dead. Which just leaves us with one other character. Is the earlobe guy the other traitor, another character who we know nothing about? And, I feel like I'm a broken record just going on here over and over again about this whole idea. And don't get me wrong, really cool chapter. I love seeing that Yura uses the Shinuchi's power, has the centipede crawling around his body pretty much, and like, hey, it also seems like Samura and Chihiro are getting ready to arrive. It's going to be a really big moment whenever that happens, because, like, a lot of us have been waiting on that for a while. And hey, are they going to have to fight Kasen where the Shinuchi is? Like, are we going to see Ichiki and Izami actually fight here in the moment? What is Kasen going to do? I mean, this chapter begs open a lot of questions, and a lot of questions I really want the answer to. But at the same time, I sort of am left leaving this chapter being like, oh, yeah, great, Kasen's the traitor. Now, I'm going to spoil a few other traitor reveals in anime and manga here that have been, like, big deals. Like, as I mentioned earlier, I'm about to spoil both Bleach and My Hero Academia, 2 long-running shonen series that had big traitor reveals like this, right? The first one I want to talk about is My Hero Academia. Throughout the entire series, there's this idea of who is the traitor within Class 1A. And eventually, as we learn later in the series, it's Aoyama. Aoyama is strictly the traitor. And that reveal works on a number of levels. Because Aoyama was built up as Deku's friend, we knew they interacted with each other. We knew Aoyama's character, and knowing his character and having it so built up, it showed us that Horikoshi thought this out beforehand. Not to say Hokuzono did not think that, like, hey, Kasen's a traitor, but like I said, it would mean so much more if we knew any morsel about Kasen before we got into this arc, really, and got into this thing. And granted, before this arc, we knew nothing about Kudo, but we got 2 chapters where Kudo was just helping out Hakuri, which made it, and Kudo had a lasting impact on Hakuri's life, it seems, to make him be a worthy person. I may just be coping with myself, right? I may be, like, saying, oh, this is stupid because of this reason, but I just feel like we could have a little bit more context here in the moment, and that's something that Hokuzono has not given us here, right? The other thing is Bleach. Aizen was the traitor there, right? This small, soft-spoken guy going through, talking of all of this stuff, right? Eventually, he's murdered, but oh wait, he's the big bad guy. You know why that worked? We got Aizen built up. And you know what we didn't get for Kassen? We did not get him built up. And that's really where I'm going to leave my thoughts on this chapter of Kagurabachi, because I feel like the more I speak, the more I'm going to be going in circles, being like, hey, he didn't get built up enough, and that's sort of what we get here in the moment, right? But yeah, I really hope you guys all enjoyed this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 94. My head hurts a whole lot, so I'm going to try to get this video out and then just get back to my dorm room and play like Hollow Knight Silk Song or something, because oh boy, I don't think I need to be making videos right now, right? But with all of that out of the way, if you guys did enjoy this video, I've got plenty of other Kagurabachi videos up on my YouTube channel. There'll be a playlist in the description box of this video along with the end card of this video as well. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm on a Kagurabachi podcast called the Kaminabi Headquarters. We started that podcast up before we started this arc in Kagurabachi, fun fact. If you want to go check out that, there are locations that you can go do that. There'll be like a thing on screen. Read it, go do things at places, right? And yeah, with all that out of the way, I will catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 95. Again, this chapter was chapter number 94, titled The Second Arrow, and I will catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma, signing out.